Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished guests. I'm very grateful for the chance to join you all at this year's Boma of Africa Festival. As you mark Africa Integration Day and the third anniversary of AfCFTA, I'd like to thank the African Union and its agencies, AfroChampions, and this year's Boma organizers for asking me to share some thoughts of the context in which Africa's development questions are being posed. I have, as many of you know, loved the continent and the countries in Africa for a very long time. I'll always be very proud to have been the first sitting president to visit the continent on an extended stay and to work closely with African leaders on issues that matter to all our futures, from trade to debt relief to public health and education and climate change. Since leaving office, I've been grateful for the opportunity to continue much of that work through the Clinton Foundation and our Health Access Initiative. To this day, I still believe that signing the African Growth and Opportunity Act was one of the most important things I did as president. AGOA created new market opportunities and drove up both trade volumes and economic diversification efforts all across the continent, ushering in a period of remarkable and unprecedented economic growth. New jobs were created. The export competitiveness of many African products increased, and the region became a recognized and reliable supplier. Of course, the political and economic landscape of Africa has transformed in countless ways in the nearly quarter century since AGOA was launched. The continent has the youngest and fastest growing population anywhere on Earth. By 2050, 1 of every 4 people on our planet will be African. Some African economies are among the fastest growing in the world, but inequalities still remain, and they're staggering within and among countries. And the impacts of COVID and now Russia's invasion of Ukraine are being felt most sharply in Africa. So given this landscape, AGOA alone cannot tip the scales on inclusive, sustainable economic development. And of course, it was never really meant to. Growth cannot and won't reside in trade relations with the U.S. or other external markets alone. Those outcomes will require economic integration across the continent through free trade agreements like AfCFTA. Integration and intra-African trade will build regional value chains, achieve economies of scale, and drive economic diversification, including more technology-intensive goods and services and fewer commodities. If we've learned anything from the pandemic, from supply chain disruptions, and from the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it's that all economies, and especially African economies, need more resiliency to absorb and survive inevitable shocks that otherwise will derail hard-fought development gains. This is a new moment with new opportunities to make this vision a reality. African economies have the agility and appetite for innovation that could bypass the traditional paths to development. The pace of digital technology uptake across the continent has been dizzying. Technology, particularly mobile technology, has transformed the continent financially, socially, and politically, leapfrogging whole generations of banking and farming tools. But it's not a given that we can translate that technology uptake into tech-driven economic development that catalyzes inclusive growth and reduces inequalities, creates jobs and opportunities, and strengthens economy through diversification and resilience. That will require new and innovative partnerships focused on infrastructure, both physical and regulatory, and emphasizing education and R&D. It will require long-term investments, not short-term fixes, even during crises. One particular opportunity for long-term investment is in clean energy. Study after study shows renewable energy investments in African nations would provide significantly cheaper electricity than their fossil counterparts. But for Africa to make the transition to a clean energy future, we need real partners and commitments from the rest of the world. Africa's disproportionate climate change burden provides a unique opportunity for the rest of us to push toward climate justice and a safer, better, more prosperous future. As Africa is climate change ground zero, it needs more enabling technology and financing. It's possible if we all make it a priority. This is a moment of great challenge and great opportunity. Given the progress of recent decades, it's clear that a prosperous future is possible for all. But getting there will require continued partnerships, both inside the continent and with your friends around the world, including here in the United States. I'm still committed to doing whatever I can to build those partnerships. And I still believe Africa's brightest days are ahead. Thank you.
Excellencies, heads of state, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission and Commissioners, distinguished participants of the Boma. On this auspicious Africa Integration Day, I'm joining you to participate in the dialogue on the theme, Taking Stock of the African Century, which is an apt theme for the times in which we find ourselves. As the world confronts its third major economic and financial crisis this century, one can inquire philosophically about what will be left of this century for us to inherit. I believe the time has come for the continent of Africa and the entire world to think very hard about the models and instruments we've created for dealing with economic and financial crises. In my capacity as the African Union Champion for Financial Institutions, I'm called upon to ask fundamental questions about the continental architecture for managing economic crisis. It has become apparent in recent times that Africa needs to accelerate the realization of its envisaged institutions for financial crisis resolution, such as the Africa Monetary Fund. Africa's rise is dependent on how effectively we build and entrench these continental buffers and cushions. But as the 42nd President of the United States of America, President Clinton, has often said and reiterated at this Boma, there is a limit to what any one part of the world can do to defend against a truly global crisis. The global system for addressing economic downturns needs repair and fine-tuning so that it can be more proactive and equitable, especially for those regions of the world that continue to bear the greatest brunt of these downturns, such as Africa. In the world where conflict in one part of the world immediately disrupts economies far away from the epicenter of the conflict, and when a virus is able to wipe away decades of growth from an economy, we cannot assign responsibility for managing crises to domestic actors alone. We cannot leave small economies exposed to these vagaries of the international system to their fate, insist that they suffer the consequences alone. The international process for supporting such countries has to be fairer and more robust. I share the view of the optimists who say that this is Africa's century. However, I fear that the structural and recurrent flaws of the international economic order will rob us of our prize if we do not work harder to make an impact on its course and character. That is why we must hasten the process of continental integration. Continental unity and collective agency is the only path to building influence to push successfully for the reform of the multilateral economic and financial systems that affect our ability to respond to crises that threaten our rise as a continent. When we think of Africa before our individual countries, we're not just being Pan-Africanists, we're being true nationalists, because what makes Africa stronger, will make each of our individual countries stronger and more prosperous. It is time for those of us who believe in continental integration to give enthusiastic support to continental decisions and inspire confidence and integrity in the structural organs of the African Union. Our people deserve no less, and the dream of prosperity will then be within our grasp. Distinguished participants of the Boma, I wish you fruitful deliberations, and may God bless Mother Africa and us all. I thank you for your attention.